Hello everyone, it's me again, and I'm here with another video. Today's video will be back to another What If This Character Was in the Dark Knight Trilogy video, which I've been leaving alone for a pretty long time now. It won't be a villain of Batman, like what if a villain of Batman was in the trilogy, but this time it's more so about his first sidekick, Dick Grayson, his first Robin, who later became Nightwing. So, what if he was in the Dark Knight trilogy? This could have happened. For who I could have seen as Nightwing, I would say maybe Joseph Gordon-Levitt, because I don't know. Maybe it's because of the whole his character should have been Nightwing. Yeah, I don't blame that fact. And secondly, should have just been Dick and then Nightwing in a spin-off, if I'm being honest. And of course, the idea that maybe instead of becoming the next Batman, John would have became Nightwing. But let's get into things like in this timeline properly, shall we? To start off, that would have been Batman Begins, which I don't think a lot would change too much. I think it'd be mostly the same film, just to keep the films focused on Bruce becoming Batman. Hence the title, Batman Begins. Because it needed to be about Bruce becoming Batman. That's what the movie needed to be. So, not much changes other than Dick would be like, he'd be a lot older than how he became Robin in the comics. Like, I think he was pretty young in the comics. Like, he was young in certain versions when he became Robin. But Nolan wouldn't want him to be a kid. I think he was a pre-teen in the comics when he became Robin. But I don't think that's what Nolan would have wanted. I think Nolan would have wanted to age him up. I would say that Batman would have saved Dick from, Tony Zuko, who likely would have killed his parents still, or maybe Batman stops Zuko from killing his parents. I don't know what would happen, but either way, this happens. And Dick would likely be in high school and would want to be, a hero like Batman. But he doesn't change Batman Begins a lot, really. Then we move on to The Dark Knight, where he would become Robin, and he doesn't change the movie too much. Again, the only real difference is that he would become Robin. Like, there would be this whole subplot where he wants to be, a hero like Batman, so he becomes Robin, but it'd be kind of like what they did with Batman Forever, since The Dark Knight is kind of like what if Nolan did Batman Forever. But is also in ways what if he did Batman 89, but alas. But in order to differ from Batman Forever, he's not as, I don't know, argumentative with Bruce. But then what about, the city turning against Batman at the end? That would happen still, but I'm not sure if the city would have assumed or known Dick was working with Batman or even as accomplice. But they would have viewed him as a sidekick who has to separate himself from Batman. And that's where The Dark Knight Rises comes into play, which he would do so. By that point, he would stop being Robin. He would be Nightwing. And he'd likely be in a relationship, not with Barbara Gordon, because, how do I put this? If I remember correctly, in The Dark Knight, James Gordon's children were quite young, and so make making James Gordon's daughter the love interest of Dick in this universe, it's just disturbing. It's pedophilia. Like, no, I don't support pedophilia at all. Obviously, it wouldn't be Starfire for obvious reasons because Nolan wouldn't want to do a Teen Titans spinoff. But like I said in my What Deathstroke Was in the Dark Knight trilogy video, a Starfire inspired character would come into play. I'm not going to bring up her features because I'm pretty sure you know that was already brought up in my What If the Dark Deathstroke Was in the Dark Knight trilogy video. But now I have given her a name. That would be Stella. Because Starfire, Stella. They kind of rhyme, don't they? But Dick has begun a relationship with Stella. Her last name could be Anders, but to fit the more realistic vibe of the Nolan films, her last name would be Anderson. And he's been taking care of the city for some time. And some of the villains he would have fought would be Deadshot and Deathstroke, even Rapton. But he's forced to become Gotham's protector after, Bruce disappeared. And then Bruce comes out of retirement to be Batman again. And this leads to a unified team of Catwoman, Batman, and Nightwing facing the League of Assassins. And remember Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character? Yes, he wouldn't be John Blake. He'd be Tim Drake. And at the end, rather than becoming the next Batman, he becomes Nightwing's sidekick. But again, he probably would be around the same age Dick was in Batman Begins, so that way it kind of comes full circle in the end. So yeah, Nightwing would take Tim as like his sidekick. Maybe Tim becomes Robin or Red Robin. I don't know, but either way, he becomes Dick's sidekick. Who knows? Maybe Dick might have married Stella. I have no idea, but that's what I'll say. That's What If Nightwing Was in the Dark Knight trilogy. Honestly, he should have been Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character in The Dark Knight Rises. If you'll ask me if I'm going to rewrite that movie, I recommend you watch my What If the DCU Was Made in the 2000s video, because that video is exactly how I would have done the movie. Or at least the closest to what that would have been. But anyways, I will see you all later.